ability here on YouTube and ensures that we continue our daily content and keep you guys entertained. Without further ado, let's get right into this story. Charleston. Woodley customers and save $652. And has said on multiple occasions that he barely knew his father at all. This lack of having a decent role model in his life would lead to him joining his local Crips affiliation, which took his life down a dark and dangerous path. While a member of the Crips, White would perpetuate and take part in a series of criminal activities, while working himself up to becoming a gang leader, including everything from robbery to assault. As a youngster, he also believed that any crime he could potentially perpetuate against white people was fair game, considering the oppression African Americans had to suffer through in the past.
Ban him! Don't let him speak again. That talking about her massa. That talking about her Miss Lily. He talking about taking Miss Lily pussy.
But one particular incident that took place when White was only 14 years old would change his trajectory forever. At this point in his still young life, when White had run away from home, he was spending nights holed up at one of his associates' parents' house. In order to get by, he and his boys would spend their days stealing anything they could get away with, which leads us to what happened at a local Foot Locker. Always seems to happen at a Foot Locker. While in the process of trying to get away from the store with an athletic jacket, a white man stepped up to stop White and his friends.
Foot Locker. Three of us went in, ran out with the starter jackets. As we approached the car, there was a good Samaritan, a guy by the name of Michael Levy, which is my victim, saw what was happening. And he tried to thwart us, he tried to stop us from getting away with those jackets. In the process, my 16-year-old friend, actually 15-year-old friend, shot and killed him in the parking lot.
The audacity of this man enraged White, so he told his 15-year-old associate to use a weapon that they had stolen from White's girlfriend's home, who was the Dallas police officer, by the way, to shoot the man who was attempting to stop them. And that's exactly what this kid did. Talking with revolt, White later said about this moment, and he shot and killed a white man. I laughed like a mother with an underdeveloped brain. While White himself may have not been the trigger man, he would soon come to realize that for all intents and purposes, he was as guilty of murder as his friend who actually did it. After committing this heartless crime, White and his friends became the first juveniles in their county to be sentenced for murder under what was known as the Texas Determining Sentence Law. Because he was only 14 years old at the time, White was then sent to a Texas Youth Council lockup at the Giddings State School, where he spent the next 4 years not particularly behaving like he had learned his lesson.
And based on my behavior, the state recommendation was for me to be transferred to the adult prison system. I was caught up into gang activities. The state had a very strong recommendation for me to be transferred to the Texas Department of Correction.
Come the time of his 18th birthday, White was due to be moved to an adult facility, something that he feels to this day his actions have warranted. And yet there was a series of guardians at Giddings who had seen potential of White and stepped in to prevent this from happening. This combination of house parents, caseworkers, psychologists, and teachers saw something in White, and he would later explain what happened next while writing a piece for the Texas Tribune by stating, "They risked their lives to tell the judge. They risked their lives to tell the judge this kid has the potential to be somebody." Ultimately, the judge on the case decided to go against the state's recommendation that White be transferred to an adult facility and sided with the members of Giddings who believed he could be reformed. White was then sent back to state school where he would spend the next 4 years of his life. But now that these relative strangers had stuck their neck out for him, White became determined to repay their confidence. Once back in lockup, White dedicated himself to learning accountability and taking responsibility for his actions. What's more, it was during this time in his life that he developed his sense of morals and learning how to empathize with others. The group therapy he was a part of in these years was a big help in this regard. It also taught him how to think critically while processing his anger in more positive ways. Reminiscing over this turning point in his life and people who had helped him ensure it would happen, White would write, "I've always heard juvenile justice advocates and officials say, if I can just reach one kid, then I've done my job. I was that one kid. Job well done." After serving 7 years in total, White was finally released at the age of 21. It was then that he realized yet another important lesson. Most of his friends and associates from his life were now in the adult prison system, many of whom were serving 20 years or more, including including his friend who had pulled the trigger 7 years earlier, who is now serving a 75-year sentence for the crime. And while White's own mental development wasn't yet where it should be in terms of his age, he knew enough to understand that he was lucky he wasn't one of them. So upon his release from prison, White became determined to turn himself around and become a pillar in his community. He hasn't been back to prison since, but there would be one more close call in his life. After getting released, White became emboldened by his environment once again, and began trafficking drugs. He was eventually caught in Oklahoma while trying to move 10 pounds of marijuana, and once more faced a turning point. He fought back against the charge and wound up with a mistrial. White was then offered a choice: serve 6 months in prison boot camp or 5 years of deferred probation. White chose the latter and became set on turning his life around for a second time. So he decided to head back to school and become a pre-law student at Texas Wesleyan University in his hometown of Fort Worth, where he worked towards earning a bachelor's degree in criminal justice. Then in 2012, he founded the Hype Outreach Program to give back to his community and share his story to inspire the younger generation and ensure that they didn't make the same kind of mistakes that he did.
So the process. Do community service. I discovered my purpose in life, and it's working with kids, sharing my life story, sharing my past experience, my childhood experience, in hopes of making a difference in young people's lives.
He also began volunteering.
Charleston White. I'm going to start by saying, why I asked him to come. Interesting story. I met him on Instagram. There's probably 1,000 Charleston White Instagram accounts and social media accounts, and I just took the chance to reach out. Lord bless this. He actually responded. I told him what I was trying to do, and he said, yeah, homie. He gave me his contact information, and he made good. He said, if the schedule is free, I'll come do it. And, I'm gonna say this about Charleston, and I told him this before. I got a lot of pushback this week about this event. This room really should be full. And what he's saying, he has a very powerful message. Because when we're talking about gangs, as a judge, I feel like we're being held hostage by gangs. I think the reason why this room is not full is because of the culture that's being perpetuated by gangs. Young people are scared to speak out, and at the same time, they're emulating a culture that leads them down a road that ends in destruction. And so he's going to talk about how he got from where he began and where he ended up. I got a few questions for him once he gets through his presentation, and then we'll open it up to questions for those who are here. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Charleston.